Hi friends, it's Jen, and it's been a really long time since I've put out a video. I think the last video I posted was in like September or October. It's been a very long time. Suffice to say, Christmas time at my work, because I work at a bookstore, was just insane, and I was coming home from work and I was just exhausted, so I didn't really want to do much else. But now we're in January, work is quieting down. I took a week off to myself this week from stream. I was still working, but now I have a bit more time to record a video again, and I'm so excited to talk to you guys about books again. I read 10 books in the month of January, and I'm so excited to tell you about all of them. So I started and I made a few stats about the books because I really like stats, and I don't know what this little dance was, but this is the stats dance. I find stats incredibly interesting, and I watched another booktuber, Books and Lala, who did stats for her monthly wrap-up, and I thought that sounded so cool, so I immediately started writing out some stats of my own, and I'm really excited to share them with you. So, in the month of January, I read a total of 10 books. 3 of these books were considered adult. 2 were considered middle grade, which is like the 9 to 12 age group, and 5 were considered teen books. Now, of these books, 2 I listened to audiobook. 2 of them I actually read the ebook for. 1 was a borrowed library book, and 5 of them were books that I owned. Now, of these books, 3 of them were published in 2018, 4 were published in 2019, and 2 of those 4 are actually ARCs. They are not out yet. They will be releasing both of them on April 2nd. 9, that's not 9, this is 9. 9 of the 10 books I read are new books to me, and 1 was a reread. 5 of these books were actually new to me authors, and 5 were authors that I had previously read before. Surprisingly, 6 of my 10 books were fantasy, 3 were thrillers, and 1 was a mystery. And the most surprising fact to me, 4 of the books that I read were standalones, meaning 6 were part of series. Now, if you know me, I don't like series. I have never been interested in series. I prefer standalones. I prefer the story to be wrapped up. I hate waiting for things. But I guess I was in a really series kind of mood this month. And of these 6 books that are series, 3 of them were the first book in a series, and 3 were in the second book. So look at me carrying on with series. Now, of these books, I gave 2 of them full 5 stars. 2 of them I gave a 4.5 stars. 3 of them I gave 4 stars. And 3 of them I gave 3.5 stars. Now let's get into the books. So I'm gonna start with my lowest rating books and kind of work my way up to the best books that I read in the month. I think that'll be the best way to go about it. Okay, so the first book, the lowest rated book for me that I read in January was an ARC provided to me through work. I participate in this program called the Teen Staff Pick of the Month program, and basically we are given 2 different books options. We have to read both of them and vote on which one we think would best represent the company as far as our picks. So the first one I read was a book called Wicked Saints by Emily Duncan, and the book was about... Oh my god, what was the book about? I don't remember. Oh, I remember now. I remember. Okay. This girl lived her whole life in this temple, in this war-stricken area. Her country and the neighboring country had been at war for a very long time, and the reason was religion. The country that she lives in believes in these gods, and she herself can communicate with the gods, and the gods grant her magic powers. The neighboring community has forsaken these gods and instead is relying on their own blood magic. So the people who are very religious see this as hearsay way and want nothing to do with that. So the two countries have been at war for a very long time. Now, a lot of people in her area have the ability to talk to one or two of the gods. She is the exception, that she can communicate with all of them. One day when she's at the temple, her temple is attacked by the neighboring community, and it's actually, the attack is being led by the prince of the area, and he is a very, very strong blood magician. And so she escapes with a friend of hers, and while she's escaping, she happens to run into this guy who is run away from the neighboring community. He is a blood magician. He's a former very strong blood magician, so he represents everything that she hates. But he and her want to work together to overthrow the government. Now, I actually gave this book about 3.5 stars, but if I were to go back, I might bump it back down to 3 stars. I liked the concept of the book, but I wasn't as big of a fan of how it was executed. I honestly felt like it was almost the second book in a series. I was missing a lot of information when I first started out. I felt very lost and very confused, and I know that's often normal with fantasy, that you kind of catch up as you go along, but I just felt more often than not there was a lot that was never explained to me. And I don't know, again, if it was because I had read the ARC version. Maybe the final version will have a bit more edits and a bit more info, but I was very confused. And near the end, I found I wasn't as into the characters. I didn't really love them, so it was just hard to relate to them. Overall, I think I'll still probably read the second one, but I just wasn't 100% sold on the series. Now, the second book I read in January that I rated 3.5 stars was Descendant of the Crane by Joan, and I'm totally going to mispronounce the name. It's spelled H-E. I'm so sorry. But this one is actually the story of this girl who was raised her whole life to take over the throne of her country. Her father is the current leader, and the book starts with he having just been murdered. Now, he was declared, his death was declared as an accident, and it was basically shelved, but she does not believe that her death was an accident. She is convinced that he has been poisoned. So she has to become the empress now to be able to get a hearing to kind of find out who the leader is. Now, this country is actually kind of stricken. They hate anything to do with people who have magic abilities, but she sneaks out one night and goes to see a fortune teller, which is very, very traitorous for her to do. But this traitorous fortune teller tells her that she will be able to find the truth if she finds a prisoner who has a staff. So she goes and seeks out this prisoner. She finds this prisoner, Akira, who agrees to take on her father's case, and the two of them work together to find out who killed her father. Now, that book just sounded incredibly, incredibly exciting for me. I love mysteries, especially murder mysteries. I love anything to do with like Asian heritage, and this one was actually set like in ancient China, and I thought that was very, very interesting. However, I found that the book didn't really give me what I wanted. I found that the mystery itself was very lacking, a lot more focusing on the war between this area and the neighboring areas who were more accepting of people who had magic abilities. And I found, like myself, I've been learning a little bit of Japanese, and I've read a lot of books that incorporate a lot of feudal Japan in them, and they'll throw in random Japanese words. However, I do not speak any Chinese, and now I can finally see it from the point of view of other people, because I found the random Chinese words that they'd thrown in was more jarring. It'd take me out of the story because I could no longer picture what they were saying. Now, that's just a me thing. There's probably a lot of people who didn't have that, but with me being a very visual person, I really like to be able to picture what's going on. So I love deep immersive worlds where there's a lot of descriptions that explain like what is going on around me. This one I found anytime like another word that I didn't understand was thrown in, I had to go and look it up, and I was very distracted out of the story. Overall, I didn't think it was a bad book. I really enjoyed it. I actually really liked the characters. I just didn't really love where the plot ended up. I had expected a little bit more, but I still stand by my 3.5 star rating, and I really liked it. Now, the third and final book I read in January that I rated 3.5 stars is something I actually own, Lying in Wait by Liz Nugent. Now, this one was a book that was actually given to me as a Christmas gift. You will probably see this one and a few of the other books that I have in this one in my haul video that I'll be posting shortly. But this one is it is actually an adult thriller, and this one is very interesting to me because it doesn't involve so much of a mystery. It doesn't say like what happened, it's more like why it happened and how it happened. So the book starts out with this woman and her husband going out to meet this woman. Now you don't know why they're going out to meet her, but the woman is kind of waiting in the shadows while her husband confronts this woman, and the two end up in a heated argument. So the wife goes to investigate, and the husband is now choking the woman that they were meeting. And so she kind of freaks out and hits her over the head, and the two end up killing her. So they, not knowing what to do, bury her in their backyard. And they see that she has track marks on her skin, that she's a junkie, possibly a prostitute, and they think that no one is going to go looking for them. However, their son, who is just about 18, I believe. No, he was 18. It was his 18th birthday, I think. Or just after. I can't remember. Either way, he was around 18. He notices that their family was acting a little strange, and he starts investigating into it. At the same time, it also takes place quite a few years later, and the sister of the girl who was murdered is now wanting to find out what happened to her sister. And so Lawrence, their son, and this girl kind of team up together to try and find out what happened all those years ago. This book was really interesting, really riveting, despite not like having that mystery to look forward to. There was still like, you were on edge wanting to find out what happened. The only reason I rated it a little bit low is because I didn't absolutely adore it. There were still a lot of flaws that I found in it. But overall, it's a really, really interesting story if you enjoy thrillers. Now, the first 4-star book that I read in the month of January is another thriller, and that is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. Now this one is actually a classic novel. It is possibly the first thriller novel ever written, and I didn't know that was a thing, so when I heard about it, I'm like, I need to read this. So if you haven't heard of this, this is a book written about an unnamed narrator. It is this young woman who, while on vacation, meets this man, Mr. De Winter. Now, Mr. De Winter is a recent widow from this woman named Rebecca. He had been married to her for a very long time, and everyone loved Rebecca. So Mr. De Winter, very shortly after meeting our narrator, proposes to her and moves her back to his beautiful mansion. And it follows the point of view of this woman who is now living in the shadow of this woman, Rebecca. Everyone in this house loved Rebecca. They all talk about how kind and generous she was, how she did so much for the community, how she did so much for the house. And our narrator kind of spirals into this pit of self-consciousness of never being able to live up to Rebecca. I can't go into too much more without spoiling, but it is a very, very riveting read. I enjoyed every step of it. The writing is a little difficult because it is a classic novel if you're not used to that writing style, but I definitely think if you can get past that, it is a very, very interesting story. I genuinely really enjoyed it. Now, the second 4-star book that I read in the month of January is another adult thriller, and this is An Anonymous Girl by Greer Hendricks and Sarah, oh god, how do I say her name? Pekkanen? Oh god, I'm so sorry. I should have looked up how to pronounce these last names before. This is why I'm a big booktube amateur, and sorry for the shininess. This one's actually a library copy. Now, I had read The Wife Between Us by both of these authors back in December, I think, and I absolutely fell in love with it. I know it's not a book that's for everyone, but I loved it so much. It was a book that I found was very predictable, but I loved every single bit of where it went. It was perfectly predictable. This book follows this woman named Jessica, who is a makeup artist. She goes to people's houses and does their makeup, mostly catering to upper middle class people in New York City. Well, one night she's doing the makeup of these two young girls when she overhears them talking about how one of them was going to go and do this psych study in the morning at 8 a.m. However, she didn't want to wake up in the morning to do it. She was going to be hungover and just wouldn't want to go. But the study would give them $500. So this girl overhears, is desperate in need of the money, so she goes in her place, citing that she's one of this girl's friends, and takes over in the study. And this study is basically dives into morality and what you would do in certain situations. And it's run by this doctor, Dr. Shields. Now, at first, Dr. Shields is just this random name on the computer, but the two end up meeting, and the study actually becomes a lot more personal, to the point where Jessica almost feels like she's being watched and targeted by this study. Now, I can't tell you too much more, but this one, unlike their first one, I didn't really see a lot of the twists coming. It wasn't nearly as predictable, but still just as riveting and entertaining. I, at this point, will probably read everything that these two put out. I absolutely adored this book. It was really, really fantastic. Now, the final 4-star book that I read in the month of January is actually a second book in a sequel. It is The Vanishing Star by Maureen Johnson. Now, I read the first book of this one, Truly Devious, a few months back, and I fell in love. Now, this one is actually a teen mystery novel, so I can't really tell you what the second one is about without spoiling the first one, but the first one is this girl, Stevie, who recently joined this private school for people who are really passionate about something. Now, there's no application for it, so Stevie just wrote in an essay about how she wanted to solve this cold case that had taken place in the 1930s when this school had first opened. The person who had created this school, his wife and daughter were actually kidnapped one night, and even though he followed all of the kidnappers' demands, his wife and daughter were never returned to him, and all that he was given was a note from the kidnapper who called themselves Truly Devious. And so years and years later, Stevie wants to try and figure out what happened. However, as she starts investigating more and more into the story, she starts finding some threatening things from someone now calling themselves Truly Devious. So it dives into such an interesting mystery that I think is just so well done. It does have some like teen elements about like school and friends and romance and stuff like that, but a lot of it is on the mystery, and it's incredibly, incredibly captivating. And I could not wait to read the second one, and now I absolutely have to wait for the third one. As far as second books in series go, I do find a lot of times second books can be very much filler. It kind of recaps the events of the first novel and introduces everything that's going to be happening in the third novel, and I think that this was done in such a way that it was still entertaining on its own. I don't feel like there was too much missed out. I don't think that there's too much that I'm left without. But Maureen Johnson does have a habit of leaving on cliffhangers, and now I'm stuck waiting until possibly 2020 to find out how this series is going to conclude. Now, the first novel I read in the month of January that I gave 4.5 stars was actually a reread for me. I decided a few months back that I wanted to reread the Harry Potter series just to see how I would feel reading it as an adult. I read it hundreds of times as a kid, probably not hundreds, but like, you know what I mean, a lot of times as a kid. But I haven't really read it since I kind of got older, and my reading tastes have changed a lot in the past few years. I've become a lot more of a critical reader, so I wondered if I would still enjoy the series as much now as I had then. So I'm actually on to the second one now. I read The Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, the story of Harry Potter is about this boy who discovers he is a wizard and is transported into this magical wizarding world. Everyone knows who he is because he defeated the Dark Lord when he was just a baby, and so it kind of follows his adventures through the school. Now, I am happy to say that this book did not disappoint me as a reread as an adult. I don't know if it's the nostalgia that keeps me going. I did find I read this very slowly, even though despite it like being such a small book, I still found, I don't know if it was just because I'd read it before so I wasn't on my toes finding out what happens next, or if I did find that the writing was a little bit slower. However, I did still really, really enjoy it. There was definitely some points, I don't think to me it's a perfect book, but I did genuinely really, really enjoy it on my my new reread. And my second 4.5 star book that I read in the month of January is actually my most recent read, and it is City of Ghosts by V.E. Schwab. Now, this one is also a middle grade novel, so I forgot to mention, so is Harry Potter, but I'm sure everyone knows that by now. So this is Victoria Schwab, who also wrote Vicious, Vengeful, The Darker Shade of Magic that I read recently and I absolutely adored, and this one is her first introduction into the middle grade category. So this follows the story of Cassidy Blake, who had a near-death experience when, a little while back, and now she has the ability to basically, as she calls it, peel back the veil between the living world and the ghost world, and she can interact with the ghosts, sorry. In fact, her best friend is even a ghost. Her parents are very popular paranormal authors who travel around and write stories about different ghost hauntings that are going on. And they recently got commissioned to make a new TV show about some of the most haunted places in the world, where she is taken to Edinburgh, yeah, that's how you say it. She's taken to Edinburgh, one of the most haunted areas, and there she meets another girl who has the same power as her, and she starts to realize that she doesn't quite know everything she should about her gift, and that could lead her into a bit of danger. Now, I don't want to get too much into it, but without spoilers, but it was a very, very interesting read. Now, it is very much a V.E. Schwab book, to the point where I find her books are very, very character heavy. I find that most, like, the beginning of her novels are kind of build up, while the end is where the plot really like hits you. So if you're not much of a character-driven reader, you might find this book a little bit slower, but if you absolutely adore very, very, very well-written characters and a big build-up at the end, you're definitely gonna love this book. And especially, I adore anything paranormal and ghost-related, so I was 100% on board with this, and I cannot wait for the second one to come out in the fall. Now, the final two books that I read in the month of January that I gave 5 stars, I can't really talk about one without the other because they're the same series, but I read both Strange the Dreamer and Muse of Nightmares by Laini Taylor. Now, these ones I actually both listened to on audiobook, who are narrated by this audiobook narrator, Steve West, who I just discovered because of these books, and he is now my new favorite audiobook narrator. I absolutely adore his voice. He brings the stories to life, and I loved his narrating so much. These are both a bit of longer audiobooks. They're around 16 hours a piece, so it took me a little bit to get through, but they are so worth it. For anyone who doesn't know the series, I can't really describe the second one without spoiling the first one, but the first one is about this boy, Laszlo Strange. Now, Laszlo Strange was an orphan who was brought to this monastery as a boy during a war. He was gray, and they didn't think that he would die, so they just named him and kind of forgot. But he got better, and he survived, and he didn't die. Now, what kind of sets Laszlo apart from everyone else at this monastery is he is a dreamer. His head is in the clouds, and he spends his whole day daydreaming, particularly about this lost city. He has this dream of being these Taizakane warriors and visiting this lost city. And one day while he's playing in the orchard, he feels the name of that city snatched away from him, and instead is left behind this word, weep. And he knows that this is not the name of the city. He absolutely detests it. And he makes it his life work to figure out what happened. Fast forward a few years, he ends up as working in this grand library, studying the city Weep on his own, and he meets a few other people and ends up going to Weep and experiencing these wonderful things. And I don't want to get into too much more without spoiling, but I feel like I haven't given you enough. Just know, I haven't read anything by Laini Taylor before. This was entirely new to me. I do find that her writing is very description heavy. Sometimes I found it a little bit too much during very exciting parts when I just wanted to know what happens next, and she's going on for like 10 minutes about how angry someone looks, and I'm like, okay, I understand they're angry, just tell me what happens. But I do find I absolutely adore her writing in most scenarios. I love how much she builds up the world. I love how magical her writing feels. Back in September, I read the book The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, and I'd been struggling since then to find something that compares to The Night Circus, because the writing was so beautiful that it almost felt like magic was dripping off the pages. I loved it so much. And this to me is the only thing I've ever read, that feels the same as The Night Circus. It has this magical quantity. There's so much magic in this book, and the writing itself feels magical. I want so badly to go to this world. I want so badly to meet all of these characters. I'm in love with every one of them. I adore even the characters I hated in the first book. They redeem themselves in the second, and I cannot with this series. don't often feel what's called a book hangover. When I finish a book, like I'm left with this feeling of like emptiness. I don't feel that often. Usually like the second I'm done that book, I'm picking up a new one already, but this book I had to sit there and just wait, and I'm like, wow. Like, I was just speechless. I just didn't want it to be over. If she even wrote books about, like, the side characters, I would pick them up in a second because I fell in love with this world. I very rarely give a book a full 5 stars. There were definitely still flaws to me in the book, but to me, it's a perfect book. Like, it checked every box. It made me so happy. I felt for the characters. I loved the plots, and to me, it was perfect. Well, yeah, so that's everything that I read in the month of January. If you read any of these books, tell me what you thought down below. If you're interested in any of them, let me know. If you have any other cool ideas for future videos, let me know down below. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video. Goodbye!